Dear brothers and sisters, on Sunday, March 23, 2025, a crowd of 3,000 faithful gathered outside the Gemelli Polyclinic in a silence broken only by prayers and hymns. Then, on the 10th floor, a balcony came to life. Pope Francis appeared, fragile in a wheelchair, his face marked by 38 days of battling pneumonia. Yet he raised his thumb, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Thank you all." This wasn't just a simple greeting. It was an act of faith that pierced the darkness, a sign that spoke to the heart of the world. What lies behind that gesture? What does it reveal about him, his mission, and the church he leads? Today, we enter the mystery of this appearance and examine his gestures, his words, his clothing, his suffering, to discover a pope who, even in the midst of the cross, makes a moving gesture toward the Madonna. Get ready. This is not just the story of a man, but the living witness of a shepherd calling us to look beyond, toward the risen Christ. Let us begin with the visible, because it is often through signs that God speaks to us. On March 23, 2025, Pope Francis appeared on the Gemelli balcony for the Angelus, just hours before leaving the hospital and returning to the Vatican. The images broadcast by Vatican media and international networks showed us a pope who was frail but not broken. Seated in a wheelchair, he wore the white cassock and skullcap, symbols of his patrine office. No hospital gown, no external sign to reduce him to a mere patient. Francis chose to present himself as the Pope, even in weakness. His hands, resting in his lap at first, slowly lifted to bless the crowd with the sign of the cross. Then came that raised right thumb, a simple, almost ordinary gesture that says, "I'm okay thanks to God and to you." But his face told a deeper story. Pale, emaciated, with slightly swollen cheeks from the treatments and eyes that moved slowly, searching the crowd. Bandages on his arms, just visible beneath his sleeves, spoke of IVs and intense care. He breathed with difficulty, his chest rising with effort as he uttered a few words. And yet, in that marked body there was light, a smile that lit up his face when he heard the faithful singing, "Francis, Francis, we love you." His words were few but meaningful. "Thank you all," he repeated in a broken, quiet voice, a whisper barely captured by microphones. Then, a touching detail. "I see that lady with the yellow flowers. She's wonderful." He was referring to Carmela, a 79-year-old woman who brought yellow roses under his window every day. That spontaneous comment, so typical of Francis, shows us a pope who, even in weakness, remains close to the people, attentive to detail, able to turn a bouquet of flowers into a symbol of mutual love. And then there is his health. After a respiratory infection that turned into bilateral pneumonia, with 2 critical moments when he was in danger of death, Francis appeared fragile but alive. He did not use any visible respiratory aid on the balcony, but shortly afterward, inside the car, his nasal cannula reappeared. At the March 23rd press conference, Gemelli doctors confirmed the most serious infections had been overcome, but months of rest are needed. He is an 88-year-old man who walked through the valley of death and came out, not by strength, but by grace. And then, the gesture that illuminates everything. Before returning to the Vatican, Francis made a detour to Santa Maria Maggiore. He did not get out of the car. He didn't have the strength, but he had the bouquet of yellow roses, given to him by Carmela, placed at the feet of the Salus Populi Romani. It was an act of Marian devotion that said it all. The Pope entrusts himself to the Mother of God, like a child coming home after a long journey. That gesture, so simple yet so powerful, is a profession of faith. Mary walked with me in my suffering, and to her I give thanks. It is the seal of an apparition that is not just a greeting, but a theological message, an invitation to look beyond the cross, toward the resurrection. Now let us speak of Pope Francis's suffering, because this is where the gospel becomes flesh. St. Paul writes, "When I am weak, then I am strong." And in Francis we see that word made flesh. His stay at the Gemelli hospital was not hidden, it was shared with the world. He prayed from his hospital bed, worked on appointments and messages, and even wept, as close sources reveal, for the sick he met in the hallways. In the Angelus text of March 23rd, released in writing because he was too weak to read it all aloud, Francis reflected on the parable of the barren fig tree. During this long time of hospitalization, I have experienced the Lord's patience. It was an intimate confession. The Pope felt like that fruitless tree, but he found in God a patient gardener who does not cut down but fertilizes and waits. This suffering was not an obstacle, but a path to draw closer to the crucified Christ. Think about it. Francis did not try to appear invincible. He showed himself as he was, fragile, tired, in need of care, and in doing so gave us all a powerful lesson. How often do we hide our weaknesses, fearing judgment? He did not. He allowed the world to see his worn-out face, his labored breathing, his trembling hands, and in doing so, he reminded the Church that the cross is not a stumbling block. It is the very heart of our faith. As Cardinal Zuppi said, his suffering is a message about how to face it as a Christian. Francis teaches us that pain, when offered to God, becomes testimony. It's no coincidence that thousands of the sick wrote on social media, "Holy Father, I understand you. I am with you." His weakness became a bridge, an embrace to those who suffer. But what does all of this mean for the Church? Francis's hospitalization shook many hearts, and rumors of a possible resignation were not lacking. Over the past weeks, some media speculated about an imminent conclave, citing the precedent of Benedict XVI. It was said that a pope so frail might choose to resign, leaving the helm to younger hands. These speculations grew so loud that the Vatican press office had to officially deny them. The Pope is improving and will soon return to his ministry. The March 23rd appearance and his return to Casa Santa Marta silenced, for now, those rumors. Francis chose to stay, to fight, to continue leading the Church even as his body weakens. And yet, the future remains uncertain. Doctors recommend 2 months of rest, and his pontificate will have to adapt. We may no longer see the grand apostolic journeys of the past, but rather a pope who speaks to the world from Casa Santa Marta via livestream or through written messages. The Jubilee of 2025, the Global Synod, the Curia reforms, these are the dossiers Francis wants to move forward, delegating when needed to his collaborators, such as Cardinal Parolin or Cardinal Zuppi. It is a delicate moment for the Church, which must learn to support an elderly shepherd without losing his spiritual leadership. And if his health worsens again, the possibility of resignation remains in the background, but Francis seems determined not to step down unless it truly becomes impossible to continue. As he once said, "I am in God's hands, and as long as He wills, I will serve." We cannot ignore the global context. While Pope Francis was struggling to breathe at the Gemelli Hospital, the world continued to suffocate under the weight of war. Ukraine, the Holy Land, forgotten conflicts in Africa and Asia. He, one of the few leaders who never tires of calling for peace, used even the March 23rd Angelus to launch a heartfelt appeal. Let the weapons fall silent. Let the hostages be freed. Let hope be restored to suffering peoples. It is extraordinary. A man who can barely find the breath to speak still finds the strength to cry out to the world about the madness of violence. During his hospitalization, he sent messages, prayed for peace, and dispatched envoys like Cardinal Zuppi. His papacy, already marked by tireless dedication to dialogue, now stands at a crossroads, a delicate moment in which the Church must shine as a light in growing darkness. Francis, with his personal cross, becomes a symbol of that mission, to suffer with the suffering, to hope against all hope. Brothers and sisters, the image of Pope Francis at the Gemelli Hospital is not merely a news event, it is a living gospel. It speaks of a man who, in weakness, finds strength in God, of a shepherd who brings flowers to the Madonna to thank her, of a father who does not abandon his children even when the world trembles. His suffering calls us to face our own, his faith challenges us to believe more deeply, and his peace urges us to become builders of peace ourselves. The Church faces a time of trial, but also a time of grace. And what can we do? We can pray for Francis, support him with our love, and imitate him in carrying our own crosses with trust. I now invite you to a concrete gesture. Leave a comment below with a prayer for the Pope and for the Church. Light a candle in your home. Join his mission of peace because, as that raised thumb taught us, together we are stronger. May the Lord bless him, protect him, and guide us all, with him, toward the eternal Easter. Let us know in the comments what you think, how this has touched you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos and can become part of this faith-filled community. God bless us all. Bless us.